I'll introduce them going across the panel. Chris Hughton, fantastic career at Spurs, West Ham, Republic of Ireland, and then, of course, management with Tottenham and going on from there, Newcastle, Norwich and Brighton. Simon Jordan, formerly owner of Crystal Palace and now well-known broadcaster with TalkSport. Teddy Sheringham, we've got a Champions League winner in the room. Started his career at Millwall, spells in Sweden, I think, on loan. Then Tottenham, Nottingham Forest first, Tottenham, Manchester United, finishing at Tottenham and then West Ham. Any more, Ted?
Couple, I think.
Couple more. A few games for England, a couple of World Cups. So Teddy Sheringham, and moving on to Carrie Brown, who's current chair of the FWA, and Carrie's also BeIn Sports. You'll see her pitch side with all the big names on the big matches. And then finally, Henry Winter of the Times. You can't miss Henry, he's everywhere, and he's always got an opinion.
Thanks, Johnny.
So we'll start off with the first question, and it really needs to be, I'll go along the panel, but starting off with this season, is it going to be a two-horse race all over again? Manchester City, Liverpool dominated last year. Chris, do you think it's going to be the similar story?
Yes, I do. And I think if I look at the business that both teams, Man City and Liverpool, have done, which has been minimal over the summer, and what that says is that they both are very, very happy with the squads that they've got. No Rodri's come in at Man City, and of course Liverpool, two players that were injured for a lot of the season last season in Oxlade-Chamberlain and Gomez. Is almost like having fresh players. So I think the fact that they haven't recruited big means they're happy with what they've got. I think the margins might be a little bit different. I think with those that I think come below them, I think perhaps the gap might not be as big, and that will probably be down to, I think they were so exceptional, City and Liverpool last season. I think also for them to continue to reach them heights that they did last season, to do that again, I think it's possible, but hard. So I wouldn't be surprised if the gaps, that little bit smaller. But I think it's very difficult to bet against the two again. In which order, I don't know. But I think it's very difficult to bet against them too.
Simon, Kevin De Bruyne missed a lot last season at Man City. How much better are they going to be if he gets a full season under his belt?
It's difficult to see how much better they can really be, given the nature of the performance of the last two seasons. I think this is a fascinating season because I think it's, a compelling one, because obviously the two main protagonists being Liverpool and Man City, it's difficult to argue with Chris' point about seeing beyond these two. But I think there's also so much intrigue in the Premier League with the other teams, because we can't quite make head nor tail of what Unai Emery is at Arsenal and what he's putting together. Obviously, you've got Frank going into Chelsea and what's happening over there. You've got his old teammates at Manchester United, who I think is probably the luckiest Norwegian on the planet to have gotten that job, and the challenges that are awaiting him. And we've got Pochettino, who seems to be having a strange dialogue with Daniel at this moment in time about the nature of his aspirations and ambitions for a club that obviously Chris knows quite well. But it's difficult to see either one of these sides, being Liverpool, Man City, being caught by the pack behind them. My personal vantage point is I think if Liverpool keep Firmino, Sane and Salah fit, that this is their title to win. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. Guardiola, in no guise, has won 3 championships in a row, even in his pomp at Barcelona. I know Man City are an island in their own right now, but I think even, I think once Man United did they won 3 on a go, didn't they? Yeah. Did they? And I think it's going to be very difficult for that to be emulated by anybody. So my vantage point is I think Liverpool will win the title, and it becomes the intrigue in the division comes about how close the Tottenhams are going to get, what's going to happen with the Chelseas and Man Uniteds, and possibly whether we see Everton evolving as a real player, because they've certainly got the cash to do it.
Teddy, 2 of your old teams, Spurs and Man United, in that chasing pack, can either close the gap, or are they still just looking to make top 4?
I think they're going to be still in the chasing pack. I think they will get. They're around the 3rd and 4th, maybe 5th, around that mark. But the initial question you're asking is about the top 2. Without a doubt, they stay the top 2. Pep Guardiola's come in. He's taken the game to a different level for me in the Premier League. Deserves to won it over the last 2 years, and I think he will do it again this year. I think Liverpool were a little bit fortunate last year to come so close. I thought they were very good. They're the next challenger, but I thought they were a bit fortunate to come so close. I think Manchester City will stretch away again. Liverpool had a better out of the lot, and then it's up to the rest. I think there's problems in all four camps over the ones that you just mentioned. Tottenham, Pochettino doesn't seem so happy this pre-season. Ollie's got his problems with maybe the Pogba issue. Is he going to get him out? Is he going to keep him and work with him? That could be a big problem. Frank's got problems with not being able to buy his own players at Chelsea. And then we all know that there's problems at Arsenal as well.
Well, touching on Arsenal, you played in that famous 5 forward line with Ozzy Ardiles, where it's the mentality seemed to be, we might concede a few goals, we'll just have to score more. Does it look like Arsenal are adopting the same attitude? You know, they seem to be signing more strikers, which doesn't seem to be their weak point.
Well, it looks like that. I don't know. Coutinho is the name that's being mentioned at the moment, and it seems like everyone's in for him. I don't know whether Arsenal are in for him as well. With the winger they've just bought as well, it does seem like they're a bit top heavy. For me, they need to buy a centre half. Why they haven't gone in for someone like Cahill to steady the ship, to get that British mentality at the back, I don't know. I thought it would have been a fantastic buy for them, specifically for the next 2 years. But that's not for me to say here.
Carrie, I know you've been down at Spurs today talking to Pochettino, and you know they're leaving their business very late again. They've made one signing, and one signing's gone back on loan to Leeds. But you know, is that a worry that they haven't really done their business early like he hoped to do?
Mauricio Pochettino had a big rights-holding briefing today, and a lot of it is under embargo, so I won't steal all BeIn Sports lines. But I think Mauricio Pochettino was far more measured today. But the one thing he has stated, and he had stayed away from stating before, is that his belief now is that they need to be going for titles. Now, going into the Champions League final, he was saying that what I need is the tools to bridge that gap. And I asked him today about, does he need the tools? How many tools might he be missing? And he was swaying away from making any controversial lines, talking about the manager, head coach. Teddy's very worried about that. I think any Tottenham fan would be. So he's trying to be more measured in his approach. But when asked about injuries, he said that they did suffer in their title race last year for injuries. So again, the question is he needs more backing in his transfer window. And I think the message coming very loudly and clearly from Pochettino is he wants now to be winning titles. But at the moment, he hasn't got the manpower in this transfer window, and time is very tight. And I think also what's really concerning for him is the European transfer window closing all but 3 weeks after the Premier League transfer window this Thursday, when you've got the likes of Alderweireld, of Eriksen, or potentially could move out of that club. And what can he bring back in? He couldn't. So I think it's a very difficult balancing act. But I will say he was more calm, he was more measured today. So certainly the likes of Ryan Sessegnon, I think they will get wrapped up. I think he's a really great player, and they've long been trying to get him into the club. I'm not sure that's enough to close and bridge that gap, but he seemed a little bit more calm today, whether he's been told he needs to be in front of broadcasters as they preview their season. The one thing for Tottenham I'm really still surprised about is how negative or how disappointed they are with making history and reaching a Champions League final. I think with a team like that, when they're based on belief and they're going into a new season, they should be using making history and reaching that Champions League final as a building block for their confidence. But maybe that says of their winning mentality, and they want more. That the whole view among the players is they're still very disappointed that they didn't take their chance in that final.
And Henry, of course, we were there in Madrid. Liverpool won that final. It gave Klopp that big confidence boost. Have they got enough to overtake City this year in the Premier League?
Probably not. When you look at Pep Guardiola, who actually got booked in a friendly at the weekend. I mean, that is classic Pep. He is just so driven. And there was a very interesting narrative going into the Community Shield at the weekend about who would be Manchester City's captain now that Vincent Kompany, the great sort of colossus of their defence, has moved on and into management. And actually, if you look around that Manchester City team, even though it's not full of shouters, it's full of individuals taking responsibility. And we saw that last season, and we'll see it again. We saw it at the weekend, we'll see it again this season. You look at Bernardo Silva, who I think was Manchester City's Player of the Year. I mean, we voted for Raheem Sterling as Footballer of the Year. But you look at the other players, I think John Stones, who's had 1 or 2 difficulties, but I think we saw signs at the weekend that, again, he's prepared to step up to it. He'll have Laporte didn't play at the weekend, but those two are a combination Kyle Walker has come back looking hungry and out to prove a point. They've got leaders all over the pitch, not shouters, but leaders. So I think they're very impressive. But I mean, you mentioned the Champions League final. I mean, it seems only yesterday that we were interviewing Teddy in the tunnel at the Nou Camp 20 years ago, and you just had this huge smile around your face, and you'd done the treble. And we just echoed something you were saying about sort of Arsenal. And we asked you, you were in a hurry to sort of, you had a fantastic party by all accounts that night. And you were rushing off there to whichever club you were at, or hotel you were at. And we said the final question was, Teddy, how are you going to spend the summer? And given that Arsenal fans have been sort of singing certain things about you going to Manchester United and not winning much, he said, I think I'm going to wander around North London with 3 medals around my neck. so thank you for giving us a headline the next day.
Now, Ted, coming back to that point, you used to say, and I know speaking to Alex Ferguson, he used to look in the players' eyes at the end of the season, not just when they'd won the league, are you hungry for more? Do you think Guardiola has that with that Manchester City dressing room? Do you think he has that sort of, what would you call it, that desire to win and win again?
The desire, without a doubt. He is a driven man. Like Henry's saying, to get booked in a friendly at the weekend shows that he wants more. He wants his players to become better. As I said, I think he's already taken the game to another level, and I think he wants to take it to another level again and show people how good you really can be if you all play as a team and listen to me like what I all want you all to do. It's very hard to do as a manager to get every player on a wavelength, and he seems to be able to do it.
Now, we're talking about the top end of the table. Obviously, there's a few new teams coming in. Aston Villa, been there before, but had their spell in the Championship. Sheffield United have been out a long time, and Norwich have been out a while. Chris, you know Norwich very well from your time management there. How tough is it going to be for those three coming up this year?
It will be difficult, but I think it will be as difficult as any other season. And what has been shown in other seasons that there are clubs that can come up and stay up. I think people would look at the recruitment in the summer, and all 3 clubs have recruited quite a lot of players. Villa the most. I think Villa would be under, more pressure out of the 3 teams, and certainly the expectations at Villa would be a lot higher. So I think they're going to be judged, Villa, on the players that they've brought in, how they adapt to the Premier League. Are they good enough for the Premier League? Do they give them added strength to what they had last season? Whereas I think Sheffield United and Norwich are a little bit different. I think they are going to have to lean on a lot of what they had last year, which was that team spirit, a way of playing. Norwich is, in fact, both teams, Sheffield United and Norwich, I think certainly will have to adapt a way of playing, a style of play to the Premier League, because they certainly won't be able to play the game that they would like to have played, and they did play last season. So they will have to adapt to that. But they're going to have to lean very much on team spirit, what they had last season, used to winning games, that feel that they had in the squad. Sheffield United in particular with the manager, I think he has drove them on for the last couple of seasons, and he's going to have to do that again. They will all start as favourites to go down. Villa are the ones that have recruited the stronger, I think. But of course, with that comes the difficulties of adapting players that done so well for them last year, regulars last year, now not going to be regulars in the team, and managing that group of players. And a massive part of what we do as managers is trying to get that right balance and that right feel. So all 3 teams will have that because they've all recruited quite a lot of players. But as I say, Villa would be the one I think that would have, the most pressure and expectation to stay up. And I think the other 2, I think Norwich and Sheffield United, I think they'll go for it. I think they'll enjoy it. And they will get some results. And they will both need to have good home records, because that will have to be their strength for them to make sure that they stay up.
And Simon, famously, you were owner of Crystal Palace They're a side that has struggled the last year or two. They've been around the wrong end of the table. Can you see another spell of relegation battle for them and perhaps a few of those teams there?
Well, the relegation battles they've been involved in have been slightly earlier in the seasons where they've been dragged into things. And if you look at the business end of the season, Palace have always managed to pull themselves away. And I think a lot of that is to do with the calibre of managers that they've had. They've had Sam, they've had Tony Pulis, and obviously latterly they've got Roy Hodgson. You know, they've got a very good squad of players. I'm not a huge admirer of Benteke. I think he's one of those players that makes you play a certain way and really doesn't steer into that play. But I think Zaha staying is going to be instrumental in certainly the beginning of their season. If you look at what's going on at Palace, you know, you hear mixed ideas or aspirations. The Americans have been there for a period of time. They've got, like most Americans, ideas of grandiose nature and perhaps above their station about what Palace can and can't achieve. But there was a point when Palace were looking at really knocking on the door of the top 10 and moving into that bracket. And it's slightly gone away. And my view is, whilst I have a great deal of admiration for Roy Hodgson, I think signings like Gary Cahill, I don't think are inspirational signings. I think Gary Cahill is a consummate professional, but I don't think Palace particularly needed a centre-half. I think he'll go into the dressing room and be a great voice. He played for Hodgson for England, so he'll be perhaps Hodgson's voice amongst the players. But I think Palace probably needed something else. And I think if all you want is a safe pair of hands, then often all you're going to be is safe. And I'm not for one second saying there's anything wrong with being safe, but there's also the very nature of football is about aspiration and ambition. And it would be something I think Palace would like to do is kick on. Now, one thing wanting to kick on, another thing in this league, when you're looking at these teams and you're looking at teams like Everton and like West Ham and other sides that are in and around, and obviously David Sullivan and David Gold have, you know, written cheques in their own minds that their mouths haven't cashed, and they're beginning to do that now with the spend that they put in place last year with people like Felipe Anderson coming in at 40 million quid. But as far as Palace are concerned, I think they're good enough to not be in a dogfight. But notwithstanding that, as Chris is saying, these teams that are coming into the division, there's no mugs coming in there anymore. Sheffield United and Norwich, you know, if you look at what Norwich achieved last year under this Daniel Farke, I never saw that coming. I don't think most people saw it coming. Yeah. And of course, all the foundation at Norwich has been set by this man here over the years gone past. And you look at Sheffield United and say what Chris Wilder's done with Sheffield United. Kevin McCabe stayed there as a chairman, brought in some Chinese investment, gone down to League One, bounced out of that division after 3 or 4 years there, and it's a bloody hard division to get out of. Got into the Championship, gone through that. But team spirit will carry you so far. As Chris knows, and as Teddy will know from playing there, the one thing that differentiates the Premier League is quality at the top end of the pitch. And I'm not sure either the two promoted sides in Norwich and Sheffield United have that quality. Villa, I think they're on a different trajectory right now. I think they've got owners in there that have got real ambition. Dean Smith was a very sensible appointment at the time. So, you know, go to your original question. No, I don't think Palace will struggle, but I'd like to see them looking up rather than perhaps looking down more often than not. Mm.
And Teddy, Simon alluded to West Ham there. You know the club. You spent some time there. Are they ready to make that move into the top half to try and break into the top 6? Are they set up for that yet? They've got a great manager. He's experienced, isn't he?
Not so much the top 6, but the top half, most definitely. I really like what Pellegrini gives West Ham. The stability, is his 3rd year, I think. Brought his own style of players in, style of play. I think everyone's buying into it. I think everyone's becoming accustomed to the new stadium as well now, and the atmosphere that brings as well. And I think there's a feel-good factor with West Ham at the moment, that things are progressing in a nice, steady incline, you know. And I think that next step of getting into the top 10 and maybe 8, 7, maybe pushing the top 6 is where they need to be. And I think everybody feels like that's where they're heading, rather than looking down below.
Yeah. And Carrie, Wolves, Everton and Leicester are in that position now, aren't they? They're knocking on the door of the top 6. They've done good business. Can you see one of them maybe upsetting the big boys?
I can see Everton getting in the top 4. And I think I'm talking to Premier League players, getting in the mix for the top 4. Premier League players that are in the mix for the top 4, maybe higher, are telling me Everton. So I'm saying that very confidently. But the players that are saying it's going to be on BeIn Sport tomorrow, so I'm not going to take our exclusive. But yeah, players are sitting down at rival clubs and saying we're seeing Everton as a real challenger for that top 4 spot, which I think's a big statement. But when players are saying that, when they're noticing, when they're that impressed, I think that is really a club to watch out for. It's interesting what Chris has pulled up on as well with those 12 signings of Aston Villa. As a pitch side reporter, as a tunnel reporter, strangely, oddly, and I'm not a professional, but that is the biggest flag of concern for me, because I think any team that goes in at the start of a season, and they're very well managed now, Aston Villa, but it's those first 4 weeks when it's really put on you and put up you, and it's very different to anything you've come up with, and you need the culture of that dressing room to stabilise. And when you're looking for your leaders, I'm a little concerned. We've seen it from Fulham. We saw it in the early seasons of Crystal Palace's promotion as well. They're great signings, but I think it's a lot out and it's a lot in, and I want to see how that works in 6 weeks. And of course, 2 other teams that have become in promotion, they haven't made as many signings maybe as people would have wanted. I think there's a great collective spirit. It's going to be a battle for them, but I think it'll either be take Aston Villa up to top 10, or it's going to be a real struggle for them.
And Henry, I know Leicester's a club close to you, close geographically to some extent, but you were down there with Andy King the other day. Do you think they've quite got enough to break the top 6?
Definitely, I think they'll be the one. I think that because of Brendan Rodgers, he's got a point to prove to the Premier League. He knows the Premier League, and he's building a team in his image, young, hungry. I mean, you look at a player like Maddison. I mean, even when the under-21s, who didn't necessarily have the best of coaches and the best of times at the European Championships this summer, Maddison took responsibility. He always wanted the ball. I mean, you mentioned Andy King. Andy King gave him the number 10 shirt, and in that very sort of loyal club servant way that Andy King is, he just sent him a note, sent Matheson a note saying, this shirt is special, it means a lot to me, I hope it brings you as much joy as it did to me. And Maddison is the type who, he wanted the shirt, he wanted the number 10 shirt. And I think he will be a force this season. Vardy, Vardy is so hungry. I mean, you talk to him and he's lean and he's absolutely driven. Perez has come in, but Perez, people say, well, he's going to sort of push Vardy's place. He can play up there, but you look at him at Newcastle, he can cut in off the flanks. He can actually play as a number 10 if need be. So, and they've got Chowdhury. I know he got sent off in the Euros, but there's a good young holding midfielder coming through. They're going to miss Maguire on and off the pitch because he's such a character and he's obviously such a good defender. I think Kasper Schmeichel is, he's one of the best goalkeepers in the country. But I think just sort of having spent a little bit of time at Leicester, just talking to them and there's sort of people there, there's a real mood, without getting sort of over-emotional, over-sentimental about it, the players want to do something for top. Effectively the owner now, who tragically lost his father Vishai in that helicopter crash last season, they want to do something for him so that he can pay his own tribute to Vishai. There's a real strong bond between top, as there was with Vishai, and the dressing room is incredibly strong. And I think that they've got a point to prove. And any team that's on a roll, on a mission, as Manchester United were in that treble season, when they just that momentum there's a sense of that. Obviously, completely different from Manchester United, different players, different managers, different eras. But there's a sense about Leicester City that they are hungry for a trophy.
Now, we've talked about the teams. Let's talk about some individuals. The Golden Boot. I think someone on this panel was the first Golden Boot winner, weren't you, Ted? Back in 93, 94? Was you?
No one else here, mate.
I certainly wasn't me.
Long time ago that, Gerry, I can't remember.
As a player, those individual awards, how important are they? Do you start looking at them towards the end of the season thinking, I can get here, I need every penalty, I need a bit of assistance from my teammates?
As a goal scorer, you want to score goals. And by the end of the season, if it's getting close, then you want to finish the season off. You always, you're up there to be shot at with how many goals you score. It's how you're regarded, how many goals you score. So you want to score goals. But at the end of the day, when you're playing in a team sport, it's the team winning and the team winning trophies at the end of the season, which really matters.
Now we've got Harry Kane. I think is one goal behind you in Tottenham's Premier League records.
Still one behind, is it?
It's still one behind you.
Stop scoring.
He might overtake you soon. Are we going to have the usual sort of suspects for that Golden Boot? Kane, Aguero, Salah, Mane,
Yeah.
Aubameyang. Anyone else going to come into that mix?
No, I think you've got the top 5 there. I think that's very, very exciting to have that at the end of the season, that they'll be there or thereabouts. Some fantastic strikers you've mentioned there. Love Aguero. Kane's still my man if he stays fit. He's had a nice summer off this year. It's very tough to go from Premier League season to internationals, Premier League season to World Cups, and to keep churning it in, year out. And I think he's had a lovely summer. Hopefully his ankles have repaired properly.
Because he missed 2 big chunks of the season.
He did. He missed an awful lot, and I want to see him fit and banging in goals for fun.
Chris, you know Harry Kane, don't you? You must have worked
Yes.
with him. And
Yes, I also had him at Norwich. We took him on loan. Unfortunately, he got injured, and a lot of people have asked me about having worked with him. You know, could I see him developing into the player that he's become? And probably, in all honesty, no, I couldn't. You know, what I did see, I saw somebody that had a great desire to want to be a great finisher. Would do finishing sessions every day. Left foot, right foot, and either by himself or with one of the coaches. And of course, I'd seen him as a young player, but you know what I didn't see or expect was that level of mobility that he started to have, and I think that came in line with playing in a role at Tottenham that gave him a little bit more freedom. I mean, what we have seen, of course, in recent years is very much playing, you know, as a number 9 or off the front. But he had an initial period where I think they gave him a little bit more freedom on the park, and I started to see that type of mobility in him that I hadn't seen before. And I think that's credit to those at Tottenham, those that work with him, enabling him to have that type of freedom. And of course, all the work that they done with him, but as a natural finisher, he was somebody that always had it. And of course, you know, what we've all seen is that real desire and personality that he's developed over these years. So, you know, Teddy would know number 9's far better than what I do, and particularly having seen so much of Harry Kane. But he's developed into an absolute world-class player. Difficulties with the injuries that he's had, but I don't think anybody could bet against him being right up there again, and a real hunger and a desire to want to score goals. But probably lastly, you know, the really good feel that you get about Harry is that absolutely he wants to score goals, but it's about his team, and it's about him scoring goals that are going to benefit his team, and he's got to a level of maturity that I think has allowed him to be that way.
And I know, you know, Pochettino pays great store by having that team mentality and no players bigger than the team. But Simon, I want to come back to Wilfried Zaha at Palace. Is it concerning when you see players who seem to feel that they're either bigger than the team or they need to go elsewhere? Not necessarily, you know, going on strike, although we saw it with Koscielny at Arsenal.
And Mahrez last year.
And Mahrez, and you know, is that bad for team unity when you've got a player who so obviously is thinking about a move elsewhere?
Well, I don't think Wilfried is agitating, particularly in a fashion that other players have done in the past. I think as a former owner, you look at players that sign contracts with you and you want to hold them to their contract. But let's be clear, Palace signed Wilfried Zaha on a 5-year contract to protect value. There wasn't really a long-term position that Wilfried Zaha, and the form that he's in and the quality that he has, was going to stay forever and a day at Crystal Palace. The idea that he is perhaps wanting to move away in a passive-aggressive way, in terms of he's got his brother bloody running around telling people that he wants to leave. But, you know, I don't think in this instance, you know, Wilfried came out of an academy that I produced, so I know the boy from a long time ago, but I don't get the sense from those that know him now and those that are around him that he's a particularly difficult character or has an attitude that's inappropriate. He is a top-quality footballer, and I think he has the right, if ever a player, and this is where the contradiction in terms comes for me, if ever a player has probably earned the right to suggest that maybe he wants to go on to bigger and better things, I think it's probably Zaha. You know, a lot of what Palace have been able to achieve from getting promoted in 2013 at the expense of Brighton in the semi-finals, which always fills me with glee. onto the fact that at times he has been almost single-handedly the most offensive weapon Palace have had, the biggest threat, the cause for concern in most teams' minds. And a player now that's getting better and better, getting his head up, and has now got the ability to run away from the ball in a certain way. So I think he's now a player that has the capability of playing at whatever level he wants to play at. The difficulty for Wilfred is, and it's difficult for me to say this because Palace is the team that I owned and supported and grew up with, there will still be a perception that a Crystal Palace player isn't quite as entitled, I think, because of the size of the club, to walk into certain clubs in certain ways. And I think it's going to be difficult for Wilfred. Arsenal would have been a good move for him, but Arsenal don't have the dough to do the deal in the way that Palace would have wanted it, even though they didn't want to sell this player. That's why they've gone and bought this boy from Lille, because they can get him for 72 million and pay him over 5 years. The Premier League rules don't allow that. They've got to pay Palace quicker, and Palace would have held their feet to the fire. But I think Wilfred is a player, and it'd be interesting to see what Teddy's view on it is. I think he's a player that could play in any club in this league. I think he could go to Liverpool, but the difficulty is I don't think he'd walk into their starting 11. Now, if you're Wilfred Zaha and you've been at the top of your game at Crystal Palace, and I don't think he suffers from the big fish in a small pond mentality, but he will want to play first-team football, and I think it's going to be very challenging for him to get into any of the top sides, besides the Arsenals of the world at this moment in time, as a starting 11 player. So it puts him in a difficult position. But I don't think he falls into the category of a divisive player that's sitting there holding the club to ransom, making it difficult and creating a culture in the dressing room.
I mean, Ted, he went to United. You know what it's about, going to that club. Probably too young for him then, but possibly if he went there now, I mean, there's no suggestion.
Change of manager, there was a massive
thing
there. I think if Ferguson had been there, he would have taken Zaha under his wing like Ronaldo, right?
How old is Zaha now?
26.
26. You've obviously seen a lot more of him. I would say he's coming into his prime.
Yep.
If he's not going to go to one of the top clubs and hold down his own place, then he's not ready for it. It seems to me, from an outside look, he hasn't learnt as much as what he should have done along the way in that 22 to 26 period to say he's an outstanding talent. Let's not get me wrong. He's got something about him.
Is that the players he's played with, Ted, or the clubs that?
You can learn. He's been playing under a lot of very good managers that he can learn off of. I don't think he's evolved his game enough as that final ball. And you're saying that he won't be able to walk into a top team, so that leaves him a bit short.
I'm saying it's a challenge for him. I think there's a challenge in the Tottenhams, Liverpools, and Manchester of the world.
I think if he had learnt along the way, and then when he goes and plays with the better players at the top clubs, then he comes alive even more.
Mahrez doesn't walk straight into Man City's side, though, is he?
No. Well, we're talking about Zaha at the moment.
I know, but we're talking about someone perceived to be a top quality player that's gone for 60 million quid to Man City.
Again, he's another one with outstanding quality, but is he really a team player? He does what he does, and he's very good at it. You know, he's got that one move that cuts in, and Zaha is a little bit the same from the left wing, right-footed and dynamic and lively, and the end product, and maybe a little 1-2s here and there, maybe as he learnt to play with other players at his football clubs. I don't know. I still see him as a live wire on his own. Might be a bit harsh from where I am, but that's how I view Zaha at the moment.
Carrie, I must ask you, talking about a live wire, a player who's a bit on his own, Gareth Bale. I mean, we'd love to see him back in England, I'm sure. The Premier League would love to see him back. I know Spurs fans, quite a lot in the room, would love to see him back at Tottenham, but United would love him. Is there any chance he's coming back, do you think?
It's a staggering situation. I think everyone in this room is fairly relieved he's not going to China, because it would be a shameful waste of a talent at that point of his career, I think, not to get him back in the top flight. But the problem is his wages, isn't it? And who will take them on? I don't think Tottenham can do that. It will damage their whole wage structure. So that's a real difficulty. And although they've got the buyback option, I don't think that's a possibility. So he's got to change and compromise. And you would think Manchester United would be the obvious situation, but it appears Gareth Bale doesn't want to go to Manchester United. So, Henry, where else would you put him?
I'm not sure Manchester United would actually genuinely look at him with the way that Solskjaer's... I've been up there today talking to people, and the way that Solskjaer is trying to develop them is young.
Low ego.
Yeah, well, I don't think Bale's got a big ego. I agree with you. I think it's a real sad situation. I'm amazed that someone of Zidane's experience, and also I've always considered him a man of great integrity, apart from a World Cup final headbutt. But he's actually a very impressive individual. I was just amazed that he came out and was so critical of a player, and also critical of a Real Madrid asset, so who would have lost some of his value. I want to see him playing. He's 30. He needs to be playing. This is a European Championship year. Wales, it might not be the top of the most important things for him to think about at the moment, but Wales are in a dogfight to qualify for the Euros, obviously, which climax here in London. He knows Wembley well. I would love to see him playing week in, week out competitively. I mean, if they could do some deal with wages, I think it'd be brilliant if he went back to Tottenham. I can just see him there, just flying again. Love it.
And how damaging is it for the Premier League that we've lost another player of that ilk in Eden Hazard, because he's gone to Real Madrid? Chelsea can't replace him. Obviously, they bought in Pulisic when they didn't have the transfer ban, but they can't replace him now. How damaging is it for them, but also for the Premier League, to lose another marquee player to the La Liga?
Yeah, but the main marquee names in the Premier League now are the managers. If you look at the dugout, we've got the best managers probably in the world. We've got Guardiola, probably the greatest manager in the world. Jurgen Klopp, who is a rock star, who's fantastic. We've got Pochettino, who could probably walk into the Real Madrid job at some point. We've got some fascinating individual stories, Frank Lampard obviously coming through. But there's still talent. I mean, look at Raheem Sterling, a fantastic footballer and role model, leader of a younger generation. He's our footballer of the year. Callum Hudson-Odoi. I mean, I think it's fantastic that we're developing some of our own players. You go down to South London, and I mean, if you put a South London team together with the likes of Sancho and Hudson-Odoi and players like that in there, they would give any team in this country a good game. So look, we've got some. Let's celebrate our own. Southgate is doing this. I'm maybe moving slightly off topic, but Southgate is developing these players. But one of the things I think is going to be fascinating this season, and it's going to be chaotic. I mean, great for the media, but chaotic for the first month will be VAR. And VAR, if you talk to some of the strikers going into this season, they're absolutely loving it because they know there are going to be a lot of penalties, a lot of handballs, a lot of penalties. So I think, coming back to Teddy's point about who's going to finish with the golden boot, I think anyone who's a regular penalty taker at their club, demands the ball whenever there's a penalty, like Harry Kane, is going to have a fun season.
Goalkeepers.
I think they all will be now.
Yeah, it all will be. But Chris, as a manager, would you have been happy to see VAR in last year? Would it have helped you, do you think, or hindered, or do you think it evens itself out?
It obviously evens itself out. But of course, if you are, we spoke about Sahar just now and the amount of penalties that he got last season. So probably, and whether there were a few that perhaps weren't, but I would have felt that he justified the large majority of them. And for someone like Wilfred, you can imagine him getting even more next season. So I think the obvious line is it balances out. But of course, if you are one of the better teams that's spending more time in the opposition's penalty area, then the obvious one is that you are going to get more judgment calls in your favour through VAR. So will it benefit the bigger teams? Of course it will. And I would imagine if you are a manager in the top six, the better teams, you are absolutely delighted that VAR is coming in, because it certainly is going to benefit you. For the game itself, I think it will take time to adjust, and I think for as much as what we've had in the last couple of seasons, the debate afterwards, and sometimes the debate about VAR is equally as what it's been about the performance of a team and the goals that are scored. And I think that will continue for a while. Ultimately, I think it will settle down, and large parts of it will be very, very good for the game. But certainly I think if you are a manager from a top team, you are delighted it's coming in.
Ted, Henry just alluded briefly to the England structure, the England side. A bit disappointing this summer at the Nations League. It didn't really kick off for them. But next year it's the Euros, and the semi-finals and final are at home. You played 96 famously, part of that line-up with Alan Shearer up front, the demolition of the Dutch and so on. Do you think England can bring it back next summer?
I do. I think home advantage is massive when you're playing in international football. And we've shown that we can get to the latter stages. And if you've got home advantage then in the semi-final and final, then it makes it even more of a chance for us to win. Again, Gareth Southgate, I think he's doing a fantastic job. The way he's wanting his team to play, I think he's learnt over the years. He's obviously watching the top managers, how he wants them to play. Keep believing in the way they're wanting to play. Don't worry about the mistakes. The mistakes are my fault. I'm telling you to play like that. This is how we want to do it. And you keep doing that. You keep telling them. You keep reminding them. Then the confidence comes. And I think the confidence is there for everyone to see at the moment.
And Carrie, there's some great, as Henry said, some great young players coming through as well. How important is it to bed them in ahead of the finals?
I think Gareth will do that. I think the big thing I would make about that Nations League and the disappointment is understanding how many players are playing in the Champions League, and then going into that Nations League, which is a complete anomaly, because when they were playing, it's a matter of days after the Champions League final. That wouldn't even be the first group match in a major competition. They'd have another 12 days on top of that, and then you think that's a group game. So even if it's someone like the Netherlands, who would be a key favourite at the Euros, it's part of a group stage competition. It's not a must-win match. So I think, yes, they were literally, their legs were run out. They were putting together a back line that wasn't used to working with each other. So I think all the outcry over that first defeat, that semi-final defeat, not being able to get all the way to a final, if you look back at history, I think it's all the way back to the European Cup with Ajax, and then the Netherlands go at the last team that actually have gone on to win the European Championships and then gone on to win a World Cup. You have to go back decades since that's happened. So if that's the situation, if European Cup winners that are predominantly from one country can't go on and win major tournaments, it's no surprise really to me that we didn't get into that final coming up against such a strong team days after a Champions League final where the majority of our players were playing.
Simon, Gareth's a good Crystal Palace lad
Sure.
At heart. What sort of job do you think he's done?
I think he's done a very good job. I think he's a 21st century international manager. I think he interacts with the media in a certain way. I think the structure, I was underwhelmed by the appointment from the first outset. My sort of attitude was, well, Gareth Southgate's achievements in football management were to put Middlesbrough in the middle of the Championship with a very good chairman supporting him. So I was underwhelmed by that. But if you look at the nature of the way that he has played his hand, if you put a lawyer in charge of a business, you end up in court most of the time. If you put the 21 manager in charge of the national side, you're going to get young players being given an opportunity. And I think the nature or the mood of the country was so low on expectation that this World Cup didn't give him a free hit, but gave him an opportunity to be very expressive and brave. And I think in football management, I like to see football managers that are definitely right or definitely wrong, ideally definitely right, but definite in their views. And the point about the way that Gareth Southgate is being committed to his own calls, protecting his players, insulating them and wanting to play a certain way is very good. I think the challenge that we've got now with Gareth is that after the World Cup, and I'm not one of those that I'm a great supporter of the England team and I want us to be successful, but I also want us to be realistic and pragmatic. I don't think it should be like Rudyard Kipling, impersonating one imposter, we're full of euphoria when we win and full of depression when we lose. We've got to get balance. But in the World Cup last year, we beat the teams that we should have beaten with respect. Mm-hmm. And we lost to the sides that possibly we could have beaten, but on the balance of probability might not have done, being Belgium and Croatia. Following that World Cup, so all the jingoistic stuff that I saw after the World Cup, I wasn't enamoured with. And then you've got, the righting of those perceived wrongs. We put the Croatians to the sword, and most tellingly, we bashed Spanish up, which is great for me because I live in Spain, so I get to hear the Spaniards all the time telling me how wonderful they are. So it was great to see them being put to the sword in the way that they were. But what it did was it created a level of expectation. And in this country, what we're not good at is managing expectations. So the pressure will start to build on Gareth and our expectation level. And it'll be interesting to see in the next stage of his evolvement as an international manager, how he copes with the expectation of an England side that were probably half expected to win this Nations Cup and didn't, and a variety of reasons will explain why we didn't, but notwithstanding that, the expectation was still there. We will be expected to sail through qualification, and given the fact that Teddy's made the point that home advantage is a big part of it, we're expected to be having a very successful tournament. And all of those things build pressure, and pressure is when you tell how people can really cope. Everyone gets on really well when things are going your way. It's in adversity that you judge people. And that is the ideal that I'll be watching most for. I still think we're probably a tournament or two away from really, really knocking on the door of winning a tournament. I know we're going to say we got to a semi-final, and we do suffer from semi-finalitis besides the World Cup England cricket team. But I still think we're probably a tournament or two away from being able to win a tournament.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we're under pressure for time, so we're going to have a break for 15 minutes. Our panel are going to go and have a little break and a refresh, but don't worry, if you want to get a selfie or an autograph, we can do that at the end of the evening. The next half of the match, the next 45 minutes, will be your chance to ask some questions from the floor. I think you've been given cards, so if you want to put some questions and hand them in, we can raise them. But I'm going to ask one final question here, which is to get a one-word response or two-word response. Who's going to win the Premier League and who can win the European Championship next summer? So start with Henry.
City, France.
City in France. Carrie? The European Championship 2020.
City, Belgium.
City in Belgium. Ted?
City in England.
City in England, good.
Liverpool and France.
Liverpool and France. Chris?
City and France.
So City overwhelmingly for the Premier League, France for the European Championship next summer.